Welcome back, students of ancient religion and cult practices. In this lecture, we move back in time to an Egypt far more ancient than the ancient Greek religious practices that we discussed in our last lecture. Why the sudden jump backwards in time? As the Greeks entered the historical period, they began recording their interactions with, as well as their debts to, Egyptian culture. Cultural influences become even stronger after Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt in 331 BCE, the subsequent foundation of Alexandria, and the rule over Egypt by the Macedonian Greek Ptolemies from 305 to 30 BCE, when Cleopatra, the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty, committed suicide rather than submit to Octavian, who was later and is better known as the Emperor Augustus. During these centuries of Greek rule and during these subsequent centuries of Roman rule, Egyptian culture and religion fascinated both Greeks and Romans, and the gods of ancient Egypt found new worshippers. For this reason, although we must go back in time before we proceed, we place Egypt at the juncture where its religion begins to exert an attraction and influence well beyond its traditional confines. It is thus convenient to bring in the story of Egyptian religion at the point where it will become most relevant for our general chronological scheme. As the Mediterranean world becomes more integrated, religious influences intermingle. So let us go back 2 millennia from Alexander, his Macedonians, and his Greeks, to texts that date to 2500 to 2000 BCE, hieroglyphic texts, which, thanks to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799, we've been able to read again, but only since the 19th century. Our first texts derive from the interior walls of pyramids. These texts concern the afterlife of those interred inside the pyramids. These texts are exclusively royal and written not for our edification, but to serve those inside the tomb. We begin our story at the top of the social hierarchy. Utterance number 438 from English Egyptologist R.O. Faulkner's compilation of ancient Egyptian pyramid texts proclaims that the deceased king is immortal. But this is more than a mere declaration. The text, in a way, confers immortality by speaking the fact of the king's immortality into existence. Please listen carefully. Oh ho! Oh ho! I will make it for you, this shout of acclaim. O my father, because you have no human fathers, and you have no human mothers. Your father is the great wild bull. Your mother is the maiden. Live the life, for you have not died, the death. The deceased is declared the son of gods, the bull and the maiden. And his human lineage is denied. You have no human fathers. You have no human mothers. Therefore, and this is logical enough, you did not die. This utterance also reveals to us the location of the land of the dead, the West. Or, as utterance 438 puts it, the great cavern is open to him, even he, the great one of the litter, the great one of the carrying chair, of the foremost, of the Westerners. The king is also promised food and water from festivals that will be celebrated on earth. They give you water at the monthly festivals and at the half-monthly festivals, and give to the great ones. You lead the lesser ones. Yours are the rib pieces from the slaughter block of the foremost of the Westerners in accordance with your translation, i.e. transformation and transportation, to the possessors of veneration. This relatively simple utterance contains key concepts that will remain present in Egyptian religion for thousands of years. The potential for a soul to become immortal, the location of the afterlife in the West, and the desirability of receiving nourishment from mortals on earth. Other utterances guarantee the king food and access to the gods. One even assists in the transformation of the king into a star. What is more immutable, permanent, and enduring than a star? What better promise of eternal divinity than stardom? Sorry. All earthly things are subject to decay, but not the stars, not the gods, not the kings or pharaohs. O Horus, the utterance reads, you shall not close the doors of the sky before you have taken the king's double to the sky. And in utterance 442, the immortal soul, now a star, rises and sets with Orion. You will regularly ascend with Orion from the eastern region of the sky. You will regularly descend with Orion into the western region of the sky. How did the kings achieve this exalted status? It was expensive. A pyramid housed the body, stored food, both real food and pictorial versions, and supplied servants in the form of clay figurines called shaptis or ushaptis. The pyramid texts, on the other hand, reveal the animating power of human speech. The words of these texts declare, define, and thus create a reality for the next world, immortality in the first instance, and all the good things of this life, as we shall soon review. A third element remains, however, the actions of the living. The living conduct festivals, bring offerings, and remember. The living call back into existence in their minds those who have departed. Alas, for the masses, only royalty could apply, who can, after all, afford a pyramid. Interestingly, the long history of Egypt, is also the history of the democratization of death, or, to put it more positively, the democratization of immortality, assuming, of course, that immortality is what one would want after leaving this place. We see the democratization of the afterlife first in the types of materials used to inscribe the texts that accompany the dead. As we have noted, texts on pyramids dedicated to kings are found during the 5th and 6th dynasties, beginning around 2500 BCE. Texts for nobles appeared during the 11th and 12th dynasties on wooden coffins. These are called coffin texts. Texts for commoners begin appearing during the 18th and 19th dynasties. How could commoners afford texts that were previously only within the reach of kings and noblemen? My students are frugal and perceptive. They printed the texts on papyrus. The power of the word, the power to animate eternity, became as cheap as paper, which was, to be sure, by no means free. The papyrus rolls that contained the text, or to use a more precise word, the spells that would help the possessor gain access to blissful eternity, varied in length. The number of spells included on the papyrus varied according to what one could afford, as well as the perceived need of the purchaser. Social distinctions were not eliminated entirely. A poor man might have been able to afford a 2-foot scroll. A rich man, a scroll 60 to 100 feet in length. The collections of spells contained in such papyrus rolls are known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Although scholars posit that these scrolls date back to circa 1500 BCE, our earliest extant fragments date back to about 800 BCE. We also possess fragments from as late as the 2nd century CE, giving us a total history for such scrolls of some 3,000 years. With democratization, however, came an increase in complexity. We find, for example, a complex picture of human beings as they are embodied, that is, encased in the flesh, that is, the human body. The body was not so much dross to be tossed aside. Even in death, the body required care, as did the spirit. One thinks first of the care lavished upon the corpse. The body was carefully preserved through mummification. The upper classes had their organs stored separately in jars. They were buried with riches and food and clay figurines as servants, the shaptis. But although they are fascinating to examine in museums, we are going to leave aside details regarding mummification and the grave goods of the upper classes. More to the point here are the religious underpinnings that allowed people more generally to participate in life after death. Before we turn to those details, please allow me to review a basic myth about a couple: their victory over their enemies, including death, and the birth of their son, who grew up to avenge his father. Osiris was king of Egypt, a good king and a dispenser of justice. Alas, he was tricked by his evil brother Seth, or Setek, to lie down in a coffin. I'm not sure I'd ever lie down in a coffin at a dinner party, but then I'm sober at the moment. At all events, Seth trapped and killed Osiris and proceeded to chop Osiris's body into 14 pieces, which he scattered throughout Egypt along the Nile. Osiris's wife, Isis, mourned deeply, but searched until she recovered all the pieces of her husband's corpse. When Isis reassembled them, Osiris not only came back to life, he impregnated Isis, who eventually gave birth to their son Horus. Horus grew up to take vengeance on his evil uncle Seth. There are many versions of this myth, and I have left out contradictory details. Suffice it to say here, however, that Osiris, who had died, rose again and came back to life to become king, judge, and protector of the dead in the beautiful West. The resurrection of Osiris led Greeks to compare him to Dionysus, who similarly offered assistance in the next world. But let us leave myth and return to human beings. Human beings, it seems, have the same physical body that Osiris, Lord of the Dead in the beautiful West, once had. The physical body is called Khat, signifying that which is liable to decay. Prayers and charms, the transformative and animating power of the word, allow the physical body to become Sahu, or a spiritual body. The body which has become Sahu, or a spiritual body, can be compared with the soul and with gods. The human heart, or Ab, has a close connection to the body and was conceived of as the seat of power, the fountain of good and evil thoughts. In addition to physical and spiritual bodies, the individual also has a Ka, or an abstract personality, that enjoys an independent existence and could, moreover, move freely from place to place, separating itself or uniting itself to the body. The Ka could also enjoy life in the company of gods. We may think of the Ka as a double, character, disposition, or mental attributes. The Ka of a deceased man could dwell also in a man's statue, just as the Ka of a god could dwell in the statue of that god. The Ka especially appreciated offerings of meat, cakes, beer, wine, ointments, incense, etc. The Ka could eat and needed food. If real food was not available, the Ka could feed from pictures of food in paintings or make use of the spells of the Book of the Dead to conjure food. Kas could also die or cease to exist when food ran out. The Ka was a vital force or energy that required periodic replenishment. There was, however, also an absolutely indestructible and eternal portion of the human personality. The Ba dwelled in the Ka, fed on offerings, and was healthier because of the offerings, but was more eternal and capable of living with perfected souls in heaven. The word Ba is usually translated as soul, but literally means sublime. Another portion of the human being capable of leading an independent existence was the Kaibit, or shadow, which was free to separate itself from the body, travel wherever it liked, and like the Ba and Ka, partook of funeral offerings at the tomb. No, students, we are not done. The Ku, which we may translate as shining or translucent, was the intangible casing or covering of the body, frequently depicted in the form of a mummy. The second, the power or form, was yet another part of human beings said to exist after death with gods. Finally, each individual had a Ren, or name, which too led a separate existence after death. Are you ready for the quiz? Let us review. A whole human being consists of Khat, Sahu, Ab, Ka, Ba, Kaibet, Ku, Sekhem, and Ren. In English, according to this doctrine, a whole human being has a natural body, a spiritual body, a heart, a double, a soul, a shadow, a casing, a form, and a name. Although most of these elements were capable of moving independently, they were also bound together inseparably and depended on one another for mutual welfare. The key for a successful transition from this world to the next was to preserve the harmony of the various parts. How to ensure harmony? There were some 200 spells that could be buried with the corpse. All this in addition to the care lavished upon the corpse. It was not an easy task to get from here to there, and religious texts in the form of spells help the deceased break on through to the other side. We do not have time for all 200 spells, but we can get a sense of the contents. Our first selection from the Book of the Dead is an introductory hymn to the sun god Ra, also known as Re. Where does Ra go every day? Each day he travels whither the deceased must go. He travels to the beautiful west. It is thus convenient to hitch a ride with him. We also find Ra doing battle with the serpent Apophis, but the story of his daily fight is not the point. The point is that Ra will bring us to Osiris. Let there be prepared for me a seat in the boat of the sun on the day whereon the god saileth. Let me be received in the presence of Osiris, in the land of truth-speaking. Once we have taken a ride in the sun god's boat to the beautiful west, we require an introduction to the Lord of the Dead, Osiris. Our second spell provides that crucial introduction. Homage to thee, Osiris, Lord of eternity, King of the gods, whose names are manifold, whose forms are holy, thou being of hidden form in the temples, whose Ka is holy. Thou art the governor of Tatu, and also the mighty one in Letopolis. In addition to identifying Osiris precisely, the spell goes on to praise Osiris at quite some length. The stars in the celestial heights are obedient unto thee, and the great doors of the sky open themselves before thee. Thou art he to whom praises are ascribed in the southern heaven, and thanks are given for thee in the northern heaven. The imperishable stars are under thy supervision, and the stars which never set are thy thrones. A little flattery never hurts. Eventually, however, we arrive at the point. Grant thou to me glory in heaven and power upon earth, and truth-speaking in the divine underworld, and the power to sail down the river to Tatu in the form of a living boss soul, and the power to sail up the river to Abydos in the form of a Bennu bird, and the power to pass in through and to pass out from without obstruction. The doors of the lords of Tuat. Let there be given unto me bread cakes in the house of refreshing, and sepulchral offerings of cakes and beer, and propitiatory offerings, and a permanent homestead in Sekhet Aru, with wheat and barley therein, to the double of the Osiris, scribe N. Now anyone's name may be substituted for the scribe N, and then that person too may receive the same benefits, including beer. These texts are eminently practical. Moreover, as opposed to Mesopotamia, where rewards and punishments were handed out indiscriminately, the Egyptian afterlife takes account of deeds on earth. The Egyptian scheme is moral. In fact, Anubis, the hound or jackal of hell, weighs the heart in a balance against a feather provided by Mat, goddess of justice. Sin is heavy, so one must hope that one's heart is light. Otherwise, the goddess Ammit, a combination of lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile, will devour it. Here is an excerpt from the spell relating to the weighing of the heart. My heart, my mother, my heart, my mother. My heart, whereby I came into being, may not stand up to oppose me. At my judgment, may there be no opposition to me in the presence of the chiefs. May there be no parting of thee from me in the presence of him that keepeth the balance. Thou art my Ka, which dwelleth in my body. Mayest thou come forth into the place of happiness whither we go. May the officials who make the conditions of the lives of men not cause my name to stink, and may no lies be spoken against me in the presence of the God. This speech is not enough. One must declare one's innocence before 42 separate gods concerned with 42 potential sins. This is a confession of innocence on 42 counts and is sometimes known as the negative confession. Some of these confessions are intuitive enough. I have not stolen the property from the gods. I have not uttered lies. I have not carried away food. I have not uttered curses. I have not committed adultery. I have not attacked any man. I am not a man of deceit. I have not been an eavesdropper. In light of Orpheus's doctrine, which advocated same-sex relations to escape reincarnation, the following is not without some comparative interest. Hail, Her-fa-ha-f, who comest forth from thy cavern. I have not committed acts of sexual impurity or lain with men. The beautiful West has different ground rules from Greco-Roman Hades. Let us say, however, that one makes it past the tribunal of Osiris, Mot, Anubis, and Ammit. There are still potential troubles standing between the individual and a pleasant afterlife. The Egyptian Book of the Dead provides the spells that will help the deceased through the eternity that follows judgment. One spell will allow the deceased to come out of his tomb so that he may travel wherever he likes. Another spell offers a remedy against a problem that would not likely have occurred to most people. What if the gods expect us to travel upside down and eat feces? i.e., human excrement, shit. But we don't want to. If one is buried without this spell, one may simply have to munch on what the gods provide. But with this spell, one can instead feed on bread and beer and remain right side up too. What I doubly detest, I will not eat. What I detest is feces, and I will not eat it. Excrement, I will not consume it. It shall not fall from my belly, it shall not come near my fingers, and I will not touch it with my toes. What will you live on, say the gods and spirits to me, in this place to which you have been brought? I will live on 7 loaves which have been brought to me. 4 loaves are with Horus, and 3 loaves with Thoth. If finally one has taken care of all aspects of one's personality and been buried with all necessary spells, what is the best one can hope to obtain? As our final spell informs us, the ultimate goal is to become like the gods. I am yesterday. Seer of millions of years is my name. I am the Lord of eternity. I am Horus. I traverse millions of years. I have decreed the establishing of my throne. No evil thing of any shape or kind shall spring up against me, and no baleful object, and no harmful thing, and no disastrous thing shall happen unto me. I open the door in heaven. I rule my throne. This afterlife is not unappealing. A question then arises, in light of such elaborate preparation for death, whether the ancient Egyptians were perhaps morbid. No, they were not. Egypt was the proverbial land flowing with milk and honey. The gift of the Nile was food in a world that elsewhere was frequently subject to failed crops and starvation. The Egyptians lived well, and they loved life enough to wish to continue with the pleasures of this world in the next. They also linked the pleasures of the next world with moral conduct in this world, thus promoting even greater happiness in the world that they hated to leave behind. And what was it that enabled them to do this? The power of the spells, That is, the power of words which can create new realities. One thinks of Genesis, where God speaks the world into existence, or the Gospel of John, where the Word and its power are also given prominence from the beginning. The Egyptian idea of a judgment in the next world that takes into account one's deeds in this world also had an impact on Greek, Roman, and Christian thinking. As we move forward from Homer's time, we may observe Greco-Roman conceptions of Hades taking on similar features. Hades enlists Rhadamanthus, Minos, Aeacus, and Triptolemus as judges. The dead are punished in Tartarus, while the good enjoy a blessed afterlife in Elysium. Still, the Greco-Roman afterlife never becomes as well worked out as the Egyptian scheme. Similarly, the gods of Egypt, when they escape their original geographical confines, become simplified versions of their earlier manifestations. Under the Macedonian Ptolemies, Osiris becomes one of their chief deities in hyphenated form, Osiris Apis, a union of the god Osiris, agreeable to the Greeks because he was anthropomorphic in form, with Apis, a bull god popular among the newly conquered Egyptians. This Osiris Apis was better known as Serapis, and his worship spread around the Mediterranean. After the defeat of Cleopatra, the patronage of Serapis was transferred from the Ptolemies to the Roman emperors. Isis, too, found many devotees beyond Egypt, becoming one of the great mother goddesses of the ancient world. She protected women and marriage, as well as the newborn. Statues depict her suckling Harpocrates, the Hellenized name of her son Horus. In many ways, she was like the Greek goddess Demeter, another protector of children, as well as giver of life. Mary, mother of Jesus, is yet another religious figure who has been identified with Isis, especially in her guise as a mother nursing her newborn son. One may compare ancient images of Isis nursing Horus with paintings of the Madonna and Christ child. Patterns emerge. Yes, dear students of ancient religion and cult practices, I appreciate that you would like to know more, but our time has alas run out. Until the next time, then, when we take up ancient Indian and Roman approaches to death and the afterlife, may your studies, as well as your nights and days, be auspicious.